Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a journey back, really diving into a memoir that puts us right in the middle of a pretty wild time in American history. It's Ronald Schulz's Party at the End of the Rainbow.
Yeah, and we've got some interesting material to work with here. Bits from the book's Amazon page, and then a whole range of reviews from places like Reader's Favorite, Goodreads, Literary Titan, I love uniquebooks.com.
So, our mission, if you will, is to sift through all this and really get a handle on Ronald Schulz's experiences, his insights, as he navigated the counterculture, the late 60s, early
Yeah,
70s.
exactly. We want to understand not just the what, but the why, what it all meant for him personally, and maybe for that whole era.
And the starting point is, well, it's pretty dramatic. We're talking 1970. Ron's 18. He's just out of jail, even in asylum, apparently.
Right, and he gets his draft card. The expected path is clear, isn't it? Straight into the system.
But nope. For him, that just wasn't going to happen. It felt like betraying everything he believed in. So instead, he chooses rock concerts, activism, just rejecting that whole mainstream thing.
Which immediately tells you something, doesn't it? About his core beliefs right then.
Definitely. So, okay, let's start unpacking that. What does this refusal, right out of the gate, tell us about where his head was at?
Well, I think what's striking is how strong his convictions already were. I mean, despite being institutionalized, he's holding on to these core hippie ideals.
Right.
The sources really hammer this home. His opposition to the capitalist system, the war in Southeast Asia, racial injustice. It was deep-seated stuff.
So conforming wasn't just like uncomfortable.
No, it was like a betrayal, a moral betrayal of what he stood for. It wasn't just rebellion for rebellion's sake. It was a principled stand against what he saw as fundamentally wrong with society.
Yeah, you get that sense from the reviews too. This wasn't just aimless drifting. There was a real quest for meaning, for connection. He was looking for a way to live that actually lined up with his values.
And that search pretty quickly led him into the think of the counterculture movement.
Right. Which brings us to the White Panthers. The sources mention his involvement early on. That sounds significant, maybe a bit radical.
Oh, definitely a significant step. The White Panthers, yeah, they're mentioned quite a bit. They had that infamous motto.
Dope. Rock and roll and fucking in the streets.
Exactly. Which, immediately signals this really intense rejection of mainstream norms, an embrace of rebellion, hedonism, the whole package.
It wasn't just a vague idea, though.
No. And apparently the White Panther Party in Chicago was specifically trying to organize the hippie or freak counterculture, as one source puts it. So Ron joining suggests he's aligning with a more maybe politically organized part of the movement.
There was a political edge then.
Absolutely. And you have to remember their connection to the Black Panthers. They were kind of a support group focused on mobilizing white youth, working class folks. That context is pretty important for understanding their whole angle.
Okay, so there's this political awareness baked in early, but it wasn't just politics, right? The sources also paint this really vivid picture of him just soaking in the experiences of the time, the big rock concerts, the festivals.
Yeah, the cultural touchstones. He was right there in the heart of it all, socially, culturally.
But not just passively watching.
No, not at all. The Amazon info mentions him being part of the very first Earth Day school walkout.
Wow, okay. Early environmental activism, too.
Right. And then the reviews talk about anti-war protests, civil rights involvement, the broader youth revolutionary movement. It's all in there.
He really seems to have been in the thick of it.
One review even mentions him experiencing weatherman riots, other pretty intense anti-war demonstrations. So, yeah, he wasn't just observing from the sidelines. He was deeply involved in the political churn of the era.
So he's being shaped by these events, but also presumably shaping them in his own small way. And it wasn't just in one city, right? There's mention of hitchhiking across the country.
Yeah, connecting with people in communal houses, that whole nomadic aspect, seeking connection, it comes up a lot in the reviews.
And these communal houses, they weren't just places to crash.
No, they seem to represent something more like a deliberate attempt to create alternative ways of living. Tangible examples of the counterculture's ideals.
And the hitchhiking.
Well, that probably gave him this broader perspective, right? Seeing how the movement looked in different places, meeting all sorts of people drawn to it. It sounds like a kind of experiential education,
Right.
learning on the road.
Okay, so we have the activism, the travel, the community building, but the Amazon description also hints at some really personal stuff. Wild love and wilder sex, along with betrayal. Sounds like his personal life was just as intense.
Yeah, the reviews definitely touch on that too. Encounters with memorable women, learning about feminism, different sexual preferences.
So his relationships were formative as well.
It seems so.
Yeah.
They apparently pushed him to broaden his worldview, maybe challenge his own ideas about relationships and identity.
Hmm.
One reviewer notes his empathy, his open-mindedness, and navigating all that. So it wasn't just drama, it was part of his growth.
And there's another layer, too, the spiritual side, following Buddhist teachings. That feels a bit different from the street protests.
It does, but it highlights how multifaceted the counterculture was, and maybe Ron's journey within it too.
Right.
The about the author bit confirms he got into Buddhist philosophy later, and a review suggests it led to real spiritual growth. It points to this search for maybe deeper meaning or inner peace beyond just the external chaos.
The more holistic search.
Something like that, yeah. Trying to understand himself and the world on different levels.
And it wasn't always smooth sailing, ideologically speaking. One review mentioned him meeting people who challenged his worldview. That friction seems important.
Oh, absolutely. Bumping up against different perspectives, that's often where the real growth happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests he wasn't just stuck in an echo chamber.
He was willing to question things, even his own ideas.
Apparently so. Grappling with contrasting views likely really shaped his understanding of all the complex stuff happening around him.
It definitely paints a more complex picture than just, hippie joins movement. We hear about internal struggles, the ups and downs of activism, the excitement, but also the disappointments.
Yeah, it clearly wasn't all flowers and free love.
And through it all, he's trying to find purpose, navigate social justice issues, relationships, his own beliefs, amid all that chaos.
And if you kind of zoom out for a second, all the sources make it clear. This period, the late 60s, early 70s, it was just buzzing with these countercultural movements.
Yeah.
Ron wasn't in a vacuum.
Totally. It was a time when lots of people were demanding change, civil rights, ending the Vietnam War, basic human rights, fundamental social shifts.
And Schulz himself, in his Goodreads notes apparently, talks about this mix of groups, women, LGBTQ folks, different racial groups, working class whites, all starting to see their struggles as connected.
That sense of shared struggle seems key.
Yeah, and you see things like the Rainbow Coalition, which Fred Hampton started, mentioned by Schulz, trying to unite these different struggles.
And other groups, too.
Right, like Rising Up Angry, organizing militant greasers, which is maybe a less expected part of that whole scene.
Yeah.
It shows the diversity of the rebellion.
It was just a time of intense radical politics and activism everywhere you looked.
And a massive rejection of the establishment, of the old norms. That runs through everything we've looked at.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. How is this story actually told? The reviews comment a lot on Schultz's writing style.
They do. Words like raw, authentic, energetic, rebellious spirit come up. And interestingly, several say it reads like a novel.
Like a novel, even though it's a memoir.
Yeah, that line seems intentionally blurred. They talk about vibrant narration, how immersive it is. It suggests he didn't just recount facts, he really tried to capture the feel, the intensity of the era.
So, crafting a narrative, not just a report.
Seems like it.
Hmm?
And apparently he aimed for honesty above all. The author info in that Literary Titan interview mentioned he wanted to show things accurately, warts and all, even if it made his younger self look, well, less than perfect.
Avoiding simplistic heroes and villains.
Exactly. Showing people as complex. And he apparently hopes readers connects with that humanity, maybe even question their own values or see parallels to today.
Okay, so if we try to pull all these threads together, what are the big themes that really jump out from Ron's story as seen through these sources?
Well, there's definitely idealism bumping up against reality, the tough parts of activism. There's identity crisis, which feels almost inevitable in that kind of upheaval.
Rebellion, obviously.
Huge theme. Rebellion, personal formation, but also maybe the fragility of hope when you're pushing against such big forces.
And self-discovery, central, I'd say. Self-discovery, personal growth, and also love, community, this idea of interconnected struggles we mentioned.
Plus the ongoing fight against oppression.
Right, that's the backdrop. And exploring sexuality, feminism, spirituality, racial inequality. It's all woven in there. And ultimately, maybe, the price you pay for stepping outside the lines of conventional society.
It sounds incredibly relevant still.
Hmm?
Do the sources talk about why this story, this era, might still resonate today?
Yeah, they do. Several point out that, well, the basic fights for justice and fairness haven't exactly gone away, have they?
Sadly, no.
So the book's seen as having lessons, perspectives that still apply. One reviewer even felt revisiting that energy could, re-energize young activists today.
And Schulz himself said the moral issues aren't that different, right?
Yeah, that the ethical questions they face then aren't so far removed from ours now.
So wrapping this up, our deep dive into these materials on Party at the End of the Rainbow really gives us this intense firsthand look at someone navigating the counterculture whirlwind. It's idealism, rebellion, massive personal change, all happening against this backdrop of huge societal shifts.
You get a real sense of the hopes and the struggles of a generation trying to carve out a different world. It feels both deeply personal to Schultz, but also kind of emblematic of that whole moment.
Yeah, a raw, engaging window into a really pivotal time.
So thinking about Ron's journey and what drove people back then,
Uh-huh.
how do you see that spirit, that impulse for rebellion and social justice playing out today? What kind of impact does it still have? Something definitely worth thinking about.
For sure.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.